Goonhammer has partnered with Legalized Mischief to present you with Colin Ward's long-form painting videos. Like and subscribe, and follow Legalized Mischief and Goonhammer for more hobby tutorials.
Hey everyone, it's Colin from Legalized Mischief Productions. Thank you for joining me and welcome. This is the first part of our next step-by-step tutorial series, how to paint Imperial Fists Space Marines. I'm really excited about this one. I get asked about yellow a lot. It is a very, very challenging color to paint, but I'm going to show you how I go about achieving a really vibrant, rich, visually interesting yellow using a fairly simple recipe and, of course, an airbrush. First thing I've done is I've primed the model white. And then we're going to go ahead and use these three colors. We have Vallejo Game Air Burned Flesh, Vallejo Model Air Yellow Ochre, and then Vallejo Game Air Gold Yellow. So what makes working with yellow a little different is we're going to go about our highlighting and shading a little bit differently than we do in a traditional color scheme. Because yellow is, by and large, a very transparent color, it doesn't cover very well at all. That's why it's so challenging to paint. What we're going to do is we're going to start out with a base coat of this yellow ochre. And this is a nice yellow. It's fairly vibrant. It's a true yellow. It is a little bit ochre. It does have that kind of desaturated yellow. But when I put it on the model, you'll see it's still a nice looking yellow. We're going to do an overall base coat with this. Then we're going to go back and we're going to put in the shadows with this burned flesh. I love this color. It's kind of an orangey, fleshy, brownish orange color. This is a brilliant color to shade yellow with. Stumbled on it a few years ago, and this is now just what I use if I'm going for like a really, really vibrant yellow. So after we put the shadows in, then we're going to go back and do the highlights with this gold yellow, and this is the pop color. This is the color that is going to just amplify everything, bring everything up another notch, and give it that really warm, rich, true yellow color in the end. And that's going to act as a highlight and a glaze, and you're going to see it has a wonderful effect on the model. And that's it for the base coat. We'll do an edge highlight and probably an oil wash to finish it off, but for the base coat, that's it, 3 colors. So we get our airbrush and do a nice base coat with that yellow ochre from Vallejo Model Air. And this is all over. We're not paying attention necessarily to, highlights and shadows or anything like that. This is an all-over base coat because that burned flesh we're going to be putting on pretty thin because we want a really smooth transition. So we don't want to put that burned flesh over just primer. But because yellow is a little transparent, you want to be a little easy on the first go-round. Just get a nice cover, nice coat, and then go back around and kind of deepen that base coat, get a little more even. Make sure you didn't miss anywhere. We'll be doing this with the burned flesh, but we want a really good, solid base to work off of with the yellow ochre. So and this is my go-to. This is same yellow I used for the towel. If you check out my Instagram or Facebook page, you'll see the yellow and gray towel. This is the same yellow I used for the Space Wolves that I've been doing for their shoulder pad. This is the same yellow recipe I used. So for a really rich yellow, this is my go-to. And when you find a recipe like that, when you find a recipe that works, there is nothing wrong with using it whenever just whenever you need a rich yellow. Oh, this is my yellow. I do it everywhere. So on some projects, little one-offs, like when I did Abaddon or Magnus or something, it's fun to play around with different things or just different elements, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel every time you go and do yellow. Because, especially with a color like yellow, you find something that works, you just want to go with it. So as you can see, we have a nice base coat on there, and it is a fairly bright yellow. I mean, this is not just a kind of yellow. This is a nice yellow. We're going to make it even more intense. So we're going to thin down the burned flesh. It's already pretty thin out of the bottle, but we're going to add a little bit of water, thin this down, and that way we get some really smooth transitions. Because when working with yellow, the difficulty is how hard it is to go back and kind of fix mistakes or cover up. Like when we were doing the ultramarine, we could go back with the blue and we can cover just about anything. I have no doubt that over the course of this tutorial, I will make a mistake and get some paint on the yellow where it's not supposed to be. And then that'll give me an opportunity to show you how I go about fixing those mistakes on yellow. It is possible. It's not super, super tricky, but don't worry, we'll get there because I'll for sure make a mistake. So here we have just that yellow ochre, and then you can see just how thin that burned flesh is. I mean, it's really, really thin. We are working thin because we want to have a really gradual transition from the shadow into the highlight. And it is you'll see, it's going to have an effect on the yellow. The yellow is going to get covered very easily. So we're going to start on the front of his left leg, just doing a little, and we're sticking to the shadows here, inside of the leg, kind of the crotch area, and then we want to really turn him, and you can see how much that's already getting shaded with that burned flesh. And we haven't even really, that's just one pass with this very watered down. So we can darken like the inside of the leg there, flip him upside down, and spray the underside of the arms, the underside of the shoulder pad. Now that's not affecting the yellow on top, but that's the same shadow that we would have had if we had done the head, shoulders, knees, and toes, top of the backpack, top of the arms. If we had shaded the top of the arms, that's the same shadow we would have achieved. We're just doing it in reverse. So knowing that we need the top of the arms to stay highlighted, we're going to turn him over and we're going to shade the underside of the arm. It'll give us the same effect. It's just a backwards application. So looking back here, we need to get back in here and do this side of the inside of the foot, back underneath that little ankle nub thing. So continuing in the middle of the torso, because remember, we want that middle area to be shaded to elongate the figure. So inside of the right leg, again, in the back of the torso area there, and then the shoulder pad is going to be really important. So we want to get that nice, sprayed that a little too much, and what that's going to do is that's going to give us a little bit of a hard line. You can see there's a little bit of a hard line between that burned flesh and it's kind of rounded because of the airbrush, because just how paint comes out of the airbrush. So what we're going to do, and that's not what we want. That's not what we want. So we're going to let that dry, hit it with a little bit of air, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push down. I'm going to have the air going, and then I'm just going to bump. I'm just going to kind of, you can see how thin that goes on and how quick it dries out. So I'm just kind of doing little bumps on the trigger. And that's a great way to get just a little bit of paint on something and have it dry. You get just a little paint and then have it dry. And kind of work those transitions very easily versus trying to just hope that you get a nice, see? Now it's a much nicer transition, much smoother. So now we're going to move on, get the back of the helmet. So you can see there we're starting to really develop those shadows, right? So again, turn them upside down, hit the bottom of the backpack. And we got a little bit on, so we got a little bit on this shoulder pad over here because we kind of got a little squirrely with the airbrush. That's okay. We want that to be shaded, so it's not a bad thing. Make sure to get behind the backpack and the little exhaust nubs there. And then again, we want to make sure to get in that kind of mid-torso area. Kind of hitting the back of the helmet's a really important shadow, so I want to make sure to get that nice and saturated with the burnt flesh. The backpack is starting to shape up nicely. And just by angling the model and how we shade it, you can see we're getting a really nice, like look at a circle on that backpack. That looks freaking fantastic. Really happy with that. It doesn't always work like that. But like that circle in the middle of the backpack, I mean, that's the same shot. If you go back to like the Ultramarine video, that's the same effect that we got doing it the other way around. This way, we're just kind of doing it backwards. So this is a very viable way to do shading. For yellow, it's really the only way. You can't really, like if I were to base coat this guy in burnt flesh and try and go back and do yellow ochre over that, and then the gold yellow over the ochre, it just wouldn't look the same. It wouldn't be able, like the gold yellow wouldn't be able to climb out from under the burnt flesh like it will with the ochre, because like the golden yellow is going to be going over the ochre. It's not necessarily going to be going over the burnt flesh. So there we have a little bit more on the front of that left leg. So far, this shading's pretty good. Like I'm pretty happy with where those shadows are, especially on the back. We might need to go in and just do a little bit. Like, I don't know if you can see back under the arm, under the gun back there, but that's pretty light, which we want to have. And now we're kind of getting back behind, kind of trying to get over the arm and like right by the Aquila there. And then same over here, that kind of this joint, shoulder pad, gorget joint there. Try and get back in there. That also has the added effect of shading the gorget, which we also want to do. The front of the gorget there. And we got a little on the front of the pad, which is not where we want that to be. So just kind of wipe it a little bit and salvage that. So far, looking pretty good. We've got a pretty good, I really like the shade on the shoulders. I really like the shade on the back. The shade on the front is pretty good. Like the forearm, torso. And then next is really where the magic happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to do gold yellow, and it's going to be a highlight. It's going to be kind of a highlight. It's going to be kind of a highlight glaze, if that makes a lot of sense. We're not going to be 100% concerned about only getting the gold yellow in the areas where we would highlight. It's not going to be as fine an application as like the final highlight on Ultramarine, where we were really careful about just getting the front of the helmet, just getting that little area on the front of the pad, top of the knee. This isn't that. This is going to be a more of an overall, and you can see how rich that yellow is, and watch what happens to that ochre when we hit it with that golden yellow. It's just so rich. It's like Croque Madame levels of rich. So you can see we're not being overly careful. We don't just want this in the areas. We're doing a little bit of a glaze, and you can see what that does. So I hit that whole hip plate with the golden yellow. It doesn't cover up the burned flesh. The burned flesh is still in there. It just kind of works on those transitions. So you can see like on his left knee, we have that transition from that golden yellow. It's still shaded on his front, but it makes that transition a little bit smoother. It makes that transition just kind of ease from that burned yellow, because otherwise we're going to have like orange shadows, which isn't necessarily what we want. So now you can really see between, let me see if I can. Sorry. So you can really see that golden yellow on the front. That's not even. There we go. That's better. So you can see on the back, like on his right leg, we do that golden yellow versus the left leg. I'm not sure how much that is really turning up on camera, but it's happening. It's happening. The top of the backpack. Top of the helmet. Front of the helmet, obviously very important. Whoa. You see that little circle in the middle of the backpack, beautifully shaded, the back of the shoulder pads, and then it transitions up to this really, really vibrant, yellow. And sorry, let me get this. And that's it for the base coat. I mean, it really is that simple. Those three colors. And we're left with this beautiful yellow. And I'll post pictures of this up on social media and everything, so you could see just those nice transitions. The transitions on the inner leg, you can see them here. Let me see if I can zoom in a little more. Oops, wrong way. That's better. So you can see like on the inner leg, it's a little more subtle. And then on the backpack and the back of the shoulder pads, behind the back, And then again, you can see the pad transition from that burned flesh shadow up to this really vibrant yellow. The front of the leg, kind of behind the gun there, the underside of the arm, just kind of transitions all the way up to this really true, vibrant yellow. It's just a great yellow to start with. So from there, we're going to go and then go through our normal progression of steps. We're going to go do the detailing. And then at the end, we're going to use an oil wash to pin wash the whole model and pick out all those different details, all those little cracks and crevices in the armor, and really set this model apart. So hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And this yellow, remember, this yellow can be used everywhere. So hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Looking forward to the next step where we start to really block out the shapes on this model, and that yellow will just come alive even more. The more detail we do, the more color that we put when we do the black and the red and everything, metallics, it's just going to accentuate that yellow even more. This is the second part of our step-by-step tutorial series on how to paint Imperial Fists Space Marines. I'm going to demonstrate how to paint the steel elements on the armor. So first things first, we're going to base coat the steel elements in exhaust manifold from Vallejo Metal Color. I absolutely love this paint. I love this paint range. If you haven't tried it out, I highly recommend it. They are super thin out of the bottle. You can see here, perfect for airbrushing, and the part that makes them really, really good all around paint is that just even with how thin they are right out of the bottle for airbrushing, you get fantastic coverage just with the brush. So I'm just going to go through and base coat the steel elements on the bolter. And with this model being Imperial Fists and being yellow, we want to be real careful painting this thing. Because if we make a mistake and get some paint where it's not supposed to be, it is harder to touch up yellow probably than any other color. But I do have my ways, and I have absolutely no doubt that I will make a mistake and get paint where I don't want it at some point in this tutorial, and then demonstrate how I fix that over yellow. Hopefully it's not black, because that gets a little tricky. Or this really dark metallic. But if it's just, some kind of off-white or something like that, then I can definitely and have a better chance at recovering from that then. So we'll get the undersuit. Now I'm not worried about that because we're gonna paint that leather a different color, but I do want to be careful coming through here, even though we're gonna edge highlight that area and wipe out any mistake we may have made. We don't want to push our luck, because yellow is just so temperamental that we don't want to risk it. So come in here, we're gonna get the undersuit. So got a little bit on the yellow, but this paint is so thin, I can just wash off my brush real quick, get a little bit of water, give it a quick little rub, and it should come right off the surface where I didn't want it. Should being the operative word there. It doesn't always happen. Ooh, that was a little chunky in the corner there, but that's okay. That's all right. Not terribly fussed about that. Inside of the vents. Outside of the vents. This little square dealios there. And unlike a lot of other Marine chapters, we're going to be painting the chest aquila in a solid color. We're not going to be doing metallics on the aquila. So this is really the only metallic color that we're going to be using right now on this model. We're not going to be using gold because gold is so similar to yellow, it just really just doesn't even show up. That's why you don't see it very often in yellow paint schemes. It wouldn't even rate visually, really. If you were to try and paint a gold chest aquila on a... Man, this brush is not really being too happy either. I'm going to push it though. I just want to get... There we go. That worked. Oh wait, no, that's the leather. We're okay. I saw that and had a little moment, but we're okay. We're still fine. That's the pouch. I can breathe again. If that was the side of the butt plate, it would have been a little bit more of an issue. So the crook of the arm there with the undersuit. A little bit of breath holding here on the inside of the leg. You just don't want to have to touch up yellow. You really just don't. So already it's blocking up that shape or blocking out that shape really nicely. I just love painting Primaris Marines. They're so fun, which is good because I'm starting Primaris Army. So hopefully get some videos up painting those pretty soon. So be on the lookout for those. But that's going to be more like weathering stuff than just straight, here's how you paint a Blood Angel. I'll do that one too. But I'm really going to push it with that army. So, quick wash in Nuln Oil over all these metallic parts. I love Nuln Oil. It's a great tool. Never apologize for using Nuln Oil. It's fantastic. Just don't try and use it for everything. Ooh. Got a little squirrely with the Nuln Oil there. It's okay. Just in this recess right there. Little square thing. Really need to learn the names of all the pieces of the armor on a Space Marine so that when I'm doing these, I can use the correct terminology as opposed to like butt plate and square thing. So crook of the arm there. A little bit on the helmet hose there. A little bit on the helmet hose there. All right, and while that, oops, almost skedaddled a little early. The inner thigh, kind of hip area, crotch area. And now for the undersuit, I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm just going to leave it null and oiled over the metallic. Because a little bit of metallic shows through, but the null and oil mats it down. And I really like the effect that it has. I think it's simple. I think it's straightforward. I think it's perfect for what we need it to be. And I just leave it like that. If we were to go in and try to like highlight that, it would draw way too much attention to a really inconsequential part of the paint job. It's important. You want to do it and you want it to look right, but visually it's already doing its job, which is breaking up these sections of armor here and on the arm. It's already doing its job. So you really don't need to draw even more attention to it. So we're going to go in with, this is Vallejo Metal Color Pale Burnt Metal. And we're going to go in and do kind of a little targeted dry brush here. And this is a brush that's a little ratty. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a little bit of texture when we're doing our dry brush. We don't necessarily want this to be, smooth. We want this to be a little ratty, a little textured. It's not just a smooth highlight. And just stay on the top part of the muzzle. You see on the bottom it's still matte. And it's still dark and matte, and then as you go, that just accentuates the shape of the barrel, and the roundness of the barrel, and that's what we want. So, little highlight on and this I'm just doing a very simple kind of edge highlight on the outside, and then dry brush the vents, just a little tiny bit. There is not that much paint on this brush at all. Edge highlight the top. Edge highlight the top. The inside of these vents on the backpack, I just leave alone. I don't even mess with those. And then we're going to get a nice sharp brush. Get a little bit of paint on it. And then we're going to come in and do these helmet. Excuse me. So I'm resting my hand on the table. I'm pinching the model, the base. I'm resting the back of my finger on the backpack so I have a steady base to work from. If you watch, the iLens video, the painting gems, it's the same solid base. And then I rest my fingers on this, on this solid base, so that I'm just moving like 2 fingers to get just where I need to get to highlight that, and then I'm getting out. I'm not spending more time in there than I need to, because that's just begging for trouble. But now we got some good highlights on there, and that's it. that's the last we're gonna deal with, those little helmet hoses. So Imperial Fists, pretty straightforward with the metallics. Those are all base coated. Then the next time we're gonna come in and do some detailing with the chest aquila and the eye lenses, purity seal, and then really it's doing the bolter casing and the armor, and we're home. We're good. So the hardest part of the Imperial Fist is done, which is the armor. And then we'll do the shoulder pad trim and all that stuff. But the shoulder pad trim is going to be black. So we'll do that, later. We can do that after, we'll do it after the purity seal, after the chest aquila, probably before the armor. So that's it for the steel metallics. It's really just, base coat, wash, highlight, but you pick the right colors, put the highlights in the right spot, and you get a really nice effect. Now, when we're painting a model like this, we want to work from the inside out. And what I mean from that is we want to start as close to the body as we can and paint working our way out so that if we make a mistake on another element, like the bolter casing, we haven't painted it yet, so we can just cover it right up. So with that in mind, what we're going to do today is we're going to do the chest aquila, the eye lenses, and then we're going to jump over here and do the purity seal because it shares colors with the aquila, but it also needs to be done before we do the black on the trim, the bolter casing, and the pouches on the back. This little aquila here, this little kind of winged skull here, I would be doing in the same crimson that I do the chest aquila, just to kind of tie it in a little bit. So first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to give the base coat to the eye lenses in a quick wash, and then we're going to let those dry, and then we're going to base coat the chest aquila as well. For the eyes, we're going to do P3 Gnarls Green. This is a nice kind of foresty, woodlandy emerald green. And that'll offset really nicely with the red elements on this model as well. So we just want to make sure to get a nice base coat on this first pass. And then we'll give it a quick wash. And when I'm painting something like eye lenses, I want to make sure to brace my hand on the table and brace my painting hand so that I get as steady a base to work off of as possible so I can get those nice clean. Oh no. So just dip that in water real quick and just rub that off on the corner there, and it's like it never happened. Got lucky. But that hadn't dried yet. Then we're going to go in with Game Color Black Green ink. Now you can make this, you can mix, I do recommend using an ink rather than a wash because you do want that hard line around. But you can mix this with, in a pinch, like a Nuln Oil and Bealtan Green or whatever the green shade is. Yeah, Bealtan Green. It may not be saturated enough to get a really hard line on the outside of the eye lens, but it could work. So we just want to make sure to get the whole lens and that there is a very clear delineation of that line there at the bottom. Oops. So we might even go in and do that again. Because we really want this to be dark. We really want a lot of contrast with this with this ink. There we go. That's more like it. Perfect. So nice, deep emerald green eye lenses there. Yep. Sorry, I need a bit of an adjustment here. 2 seconds. There we go. That's better. And now that that might have been probably a problem. So now we're going to base coat the chest Aquila and the purity seal with Vallejo Model Color Black Red. And this is a really dark crimson red. And it's going to be the perfect base for that chest Aquila. Oh man! Again, I hit the gorget there very quick. Get the brush wet. Start rubbing it off. And salvage that. But again, as with the steel, we really want to be careful. We do not want to rush the detailing of this model because it is hard to fix. I've gotten lucky so far today, but in general, trying to touch up this yellow is extremely hard to do. So we just want to take our time. And make sure that we're getting a nice coat, but that we're keeping the paint where we want it. We're not getting squirrely with the paint here. We don't want to have to try and touch up that yellow if we can avoid it. And right now we're just looking to get base coat down. I really like this color. I'm not doing the shoulder trim in red just because personal preference. It's just not my thing. I just don't really like the look. I don't like company color trim in general. I think I just think it's not a great. It's just not a great way to do company designation in general. But it's color scheme wise, it's a nightmare because it's just inserting this random color into the color scheme, depending on what company you want the Marine to be from, which really just makes no sense to me. So, got the chest Aquila base coated, and then we're going to come over here, and we're going to do the same thing on the purity seal. And this will be nice because you'll see how just using a different highlight, because we're going to wash each of these with Drucci Violet and then highlight up from there. So you'll get to see how different highlights, you can get different effects, even just using the same base and base and highlight color, or excuse me, base and wash. Now this brush is destroyed as well. I used like a brush cleaner restorer and either just flat out didn't use it right or my brushes were too far gone, but it definitely did not restore my brushes. My brushes are torched. So then we're going to go in with the Hammerfall Khaki from P3 for the purity seal. And this is very much a universal purity seal kind of recipe for me. I like Hammerfall Khaki from P3 because it covers really, really well for how light a color it is. It gets really, really good coverage. So, and it's a nice neutral kind of parchment color. Really like that color. So now we're going to go back with Druchii Violet, and we're going to shade the chest aquila and the little winged skull thing and the purity seal with the Druchii Violet. And I like using purple to shade red, Druchii Violet specifically, because it just adds like a richness to the red. It's a really good contrast color with the different temperatures. Red, with the purple being cold and red being very warm, gives a really nice contrast, and it just makes the red that much richer than shading with like Null Oil or Agrax or something, where it's not really contributing anything to the palette. You see how dark that crimson got. That's exactly what we want. This brush is torched. I'm gonna have to get a new brush out because these are just destroyed. That's a bummer. And for the parchment part, we're just gonna base coat, or excuse me, we're just gonna wash it with Agrax Earthshade. Good old Agrax. Love my Agrax. So nice, healthy coat of Agrax. And now we're going to revisit the eyes. And with some P3 Worm Green. As you can see, this is very, very strong green that we're using. And what we want to do is we just want to get again, bracing the model on my fingers, bracing my hand on the table, and bracing my other hand on my finger. We just want to get the front, probably 2/3 of this eye lens with that worm green. And we want to make sure that we're maintaining that line at the bottom. We don't want to affect that line at the bottom of the lens. So we want to keep that lens outlined with that black green. Come in here. Worm green, 2/3. That turned out, I really like that one. That one was good. Maybe a little bit more on the bottom. That's more of a straight line. It's not really following the curve of the eye lens. There we go. That's better. Same thing over here. Then we're going to go in with Vallejo model color yellow green. This color is insane. This color is like neon yellow green. It's a really useful color, especially for eye lenses like this or gems, because you don't have to mix. You're not just going to get like a super pale green. This has a lot of color, so you can see there how much that just popped out with that yellow green. It's just a really cool effect on the green eye lenses. So just a little bit at the front and the bottom. Just like that. And I'm not actually loving that lens anymore. I'm going to get a little bit of that worm green and try to blend that in a little bit. There we go. That's a little better. And come back with a little bit of that yellow green. And try and hit that bottom again. There we go. Better. I was just going in with that original Gnarls green and just kind of fixing up that light at the bottom of the lens. And that ended up working out really well. God, this lighting is driving me crazy. So he's not like neon yellow. I don't know what's going on today. But I am having some technical issues today. I apologize. That's a little better. And then we're going to get the white. And again, bracing everything. We're just going to put that dot in the back corner of the eye lens on each side. And get that nice Space Marine eye lens look. Well, usually I nail these in the first try, but not today. A little bit more of that yellow green. There we go. That worked. Okay, perfect. See? Easy to do. It just takes practice. Practice. So now we're going to come back. Which one was the last one I was using? Or two was it? Let's go. So now we're going to come back and we're going to mix that black red for the chest Aquila with some Cardic flesh from P3. Now this is a very, very rosy flesh tone, and that's because we don't just want to make the crimson more pale, like if we just mixed in white or ivory. We still want to have some color. We just want it to be lighter. So you can see the pure black red on my thumb there, and then this is the mixture with the rosy flesh tone. And we'll come in here. I'll demonstrate on the little winged skull here first. Using the side of the brush, just get, the outer 2/3 of the wing. And it's very subtle. The first highlight, very subtle, but you can see that it's staying oh my goodness. I'm so sorry that I'm struggling today. But you can see that it's staying crimson. It's still reading as crimson. It's not reading as a true red. So if you're doing like Blood Ravens, for example, their armor is not red. Their armor is crimson. One of the reasons we do the chest Aquila first is because I'll be painting these shoulder pad trim black, and I'll be edge highlighting the gorget. So I really don't have to be that fine with the brush. I can hit the corner of that gorget, and I can hit a little bit of the shoulder trim, and it doesn't matter. I'll be coming back to highlight that or paint over that. So that's the first pass. As you can see, we're defining those feathers, but it's not a quantum leap in shading. Now we're going to mix a little bit more of that flesh in, and then we're going to add just a touch of ivory to lighten it up, but just a tiny bit. We do not want to overdo the ivory because then it'll just turn pink, and we don't want that. So that's with just a little bit of ivory in there. See, it's more of a flesh tone than it is like a pink. And just a little bit on the top of the skull, top of the wings, kind of the outer feathers there. And there we go. That's, oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, you guys. There we go. And you can see that's a nice highlight right there. I'm happy with that. And it reads as crimson still. It's not a true red. It's for sure crimson. And that's what we want. So there, and then here just the very outer parts of those feathers, and then the interior feathers here. And external outside feathers there. And we've highlighted up that chest Aquila. Might even take a little bit of that black red. And you can see where I hit like a couple of these feathers. are kind of melded together. I lost some definition. If you want, you can go back with just that black red and do a couple little lines in there to reestablish the difference between those feathers, and that looks better. So that looks good. That looks good. Now we're going to go with some Evil Sun Scarlet. For the purity seal, because this we do want to be a true red, right? The purity seals we do want to be a true red. So make the circle around the edge, and these purity seals are not sculpted particularly well. They're just totally flat, and then just do a dot in the middle. And that'll kind of give the illusion, a little bit of a 3D illusion on the purity seal because it's not sculpted in there. So just do a little circle, and we're going to go back with that flesh and highlight. And this is where we're tapping. We're adding a little texture. Tap, tap, tap. And then ivory. Because this we do want to go pink. Because when wax gets hit, or you drop a red, like if you just drop a red candle on the ground, wax will actually lose the pigment, will separate from the wax. So I know it's a really real world kind of example for Space Marines, but we don't mind if that goes a little pink at all. Then on the purity seal, we're going to go in with some Vallejo Model Color Deck Tan. Come on. And we're going to do horizontal lines very lightly on the deck tan to kind of give it some texture, but also to simulate, a little bit of writing maybe, and just a little distressed kind of parchment, just like that. Perfect. That looks pretty good. So far, so good. Now we're going to go in and we are going to base coat all the areas that are going to be black. Which is going to be the shoulder trim, the pouches, and the bolter casing. And on the shoulder trim, it's very important to get the inside of the trim as well. And when you're, oh my gosh. And when you're painting this trim, you want to make sure that you're getting the brush a little bit over and you're getting the top of that trim. That line where it meets the shoulder pad. And that way the whole trim looks painted. So again, you're getting your brush on top of the trim. That way the whole trim looks painted. Otherwise, it leaves you with this little border on the side of the trim that looks a little strange. And we don't want that. So take your time. Again, we definitely don't want to make a mistake with the black, but if we do on the shoulder trim, It's not ideal. It's not the end of the world, but you definitely black is pretty hard to come back from with yellow. So we just want to make sure that we're being careful. And if we have to, we can always come back in the weathering. Oh God, I was painting that out of focus the whole time. Sorry about that. What is going on today? And again here, inside of the trim. And here we're going to start with the purity seal and kind of pull. There we go. And again, we're going to start with the purity seal. And work our way back. If you notice, I'm not trying to paint the whole pad trim at once. I'm making sure I have a good handle on it. I'm making sure I have a good angle. And I'll just paint a little section, and then I can come back to do the other sections. So now we have a nice black trim. And this is tricky, just trying to get down into those recesses without mucking up the armor around it. Sometimes it's just not possible. So now we have the black trim, and let's get these pouches base coated, because we're going to do a black leather on the pouches as well. The thing about Imperial Fists is, like, I feel like once you really have to limit your palette, you don't want it to be like a boring looking army, but which is hard to do with yellow. But I feel like once you start just adding color, if we were to do a brown leather on these with the red and the black, and I just feel like it would be a little much. So we'll just do a simple black leather, just a quick black leather on these, and call it a day. So the focus remains on the armor, on the Aquila, on the eye lenses. It's not jumping around all over the place. Your eye isn't having to jump all over the place. So black bolter casing. I just think the red and black, or excuse me, the yellow and black is just so striking. But if you want to spice it up a bit, you could do a red, like a true red bolter casing. Nothing wrong with that. I just like I like black bolter casings in general in most schemes. I think it's very utilitarian and very fitting for most schemes. So I tend to do black bolter casings, but you know, completely up to you. So get the top here. And I like this stage of kind of base coating too, because now you can really start to see. Now you can really start to see everything coming together too, with the armor and the weapons and the detailing really starting to come together. So this is the fun part. The really fun part is going to be when we get to weathering. We do the sponge chipping and the oil wash and really watch this come together. Because I think just Imperial Fists, if you just a little bit of weathering, just like some sponge chipping and stuff, just looks incredible on Imperial Fists. The yellow just takes weathering so well. And it's easier than I think a lot of people think it is. So I'm going to show you how to do that as one of the last. It's going to be one of the last parts of the tutorial because we have to finish painting it before we can weather it. So we got that black bolter casing. It's looking good. If I can figure out where in here is focused, that would be great. Now we're going to do a quick leather. We're going to do black and a little bit of that deck tan that we had out. And what's going to do is it's just going to continue to desaturate and lighten the black. So we're just going to go real rough with some texture, kind of highlights, real general, get more deck tan. And it's a gray, but it's like a tannish gray. It's not a just paler gray. There's a little something there from the deck tan. A couple little scratches, some texture, and this is just tapping to give it texture. We're not painting perfect blends or anything like that. We want texture on that. And then a little bit lighter. And then just a couple little tick marks of this almost pure deck tan. This is going to be almost pure deck tan. A couple little scratches here and there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come in with this Secret Weapon heavy body black. And we're going to thin that down just a little bit. Just a little bit. You can see it's normally a glaze, so it's normally pretty thin, but this is going to be pretty thin. And then we're just going to go, and this is a well pigmented black glaze. And what that's going to do is just take this whole thing back to black, but leave if you can see very well there. There we go, a little bit. I'm going to leave those, there it is. So you can leave those scratches in the leather. And then at the end, we'll make sure that's nice and matte for the final finish for the leather. So then we're going to go in with this neutral gray to do the shoulder pad trim. And this is just a straight gray. This is a pretty light gray, but this is just a straight gray. We're not getting fancy with the color or anything because we need to be very, very fine with this. Coming on this inside corner here. And inside corner here. Inside corner coming up this way. And again, we're being very, very careful with that highlight. And then outside edge there. So pretty straightforward, but it gives a nice definition to that trim. We may want to carry this outside edge a little further, down to about the elbow. But in this one, we don't want to connect it to the purity seal. We want to leave it short a little bit. So make sure we get the high point there. And we don't want to do the inside edge all the way up either. We want to leave that a little short as well. Just so it's not totally uniform. But we got the effect that we wanted. Those are well defined now. And now we're going to come in on the bolter casing with some intermediate blue from Vallejo Model Color. This is like a rust gray or a Fenrisian gray or something. It's a very blue gray, but it's just perfect for just doing a quick edge highlight on black. So, and then we're just going to get the lead edge of everything. We're not going to do the whole thing. So top and front, oops, wrong angle. Top and front, top. We are going to get those rivets. Then we're going to come back here, get those little nubs in the front. Top there, rivet, front of that, in here, and top, and then top there. And that's pretty much the front of the bolter casing right there. Then we'll come across the top here. And again, this is with that intermediate blue. And we want it to be thin so that it flows off the brush and it gives us those nice clean highlights. Actually, we can probably throw one right here and right there. So it gives us a nice clean highlight, but when this intermediate blue dries, it really blends into the black nicely. That one's a little tricky, but we want to get the top there. And then again, just the front, front. Top of this panel, top here, front there, top there. And then we can come in here and just give it a quick little and give it a nice black bolter casing, black shoulder trim, chest aquila. I like that crimson on the wing skull. I think that ended up looking really good. So as far as detailing go, and then that pouch, you can see that dried a little bit. So there's a little bit of texture on there, but it's definitely still black. When that goes matte, it's going to end up looking really good. So We got the Purity Seal, chest Aquila, the eye lenses. Pretty good. Happy with that. Next time, what we're going to do is we're going to edge highlight the Marine, and then maybe do transfers. So what's left on him is edge highlighting, transfers, weathering, so chipping, and the oil wash. So I'll probably have to split that up into 2 parts, just because the edge highlighting is going to take a little bit, and then transfers. So I'll probably do edge highlighting and transfers in the next one, and then do all the chipping, oil wash, and then throw them on a base in the final one. So we're getting pretty close. I mean, this guy looks pretty good. This would be a really good scheme. I cannot wait to start edge highlighting this guy and really bring out those shadows, and then get to the weathering, because the weathering on Imperial Fists is, in my opinion, like almost mandatory. Almost mandatory because of how much it brings out the character of the model. So, hope you enjoyed so far. And we're going to get to the end on this guy here pretty quick. We need to track down a little fist transfer for his shoulder, but we'll work it out. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be edge highlighting the miniature and applying the transfers. Then in part 5, we're going to come back and we're going to do a little bit of weathering, and we're going to do an oil wash and pop this guy on a base, and he'll be ready to go. So see the finish line now. Very excited about this. So first things first, we're going to edge highlight the model. If you haven't watched the Grayscale Space Marine tutorial yet, it was the first video that I posted to the Patreon. Go back and it'll explain kind of the lead edge highlighting technique that I'll be using. I'll be talking it through, of course, but it's a good reference as well. So we're going to take the final airbrush highlight color, that golden yellow, and we're going to mix in a little bit of the Citadel Edge Dorn yellow. If you play Imperial Fists, if you plan on painting a lot of Imperial Fists, go online today and try and find some of this stuff. This is discontinued. GW no longer makes this. It's one of the reasons I don't use a lot of GW paints in my paint recipes, is because they change their paint lines so often. It makes it difficult for an army project. If I have to go back a year or 2 later and add to a project, I don't know if the same color is going to be available. So one of the things that I love about this Dorn yellow edge is that it is very, very, very pale. I mean, this is almost white, but it is yellow, and it does have phenomenal coverage. It just covers really, really well, but it's too light to just use for an edge highlight. So we're going to be mixing in a little bit of that gold yellow to richen, I don't think that's a word, but we're going to use it to saturate, to get that yellow. So we're going to take a few little brushes full of that Dorn yellow. I went out, and when my FLGS was getting rid of, so like 2 drops of that gold yellow, when my FLGS was getting rid of that, all their technical paints, I went in and got, I think, 2 or 3 of those Dorn yellow pots just to have forever. And you can see how, oh my gosh, that is, what happened to the color? Oh my gosh, I'm having some color issues today. So you can see how much lighter that is than this kind of mustard golden yellow that we have for the Space Marine. I'm going to get that off camera though, because it's extremely distracting. That's better. You can see it's a true yellow. It's taken that golden yellow and made it a true pale yellow. But if we just did the Dorn yellow, it would be way, way, way too stark. So we're going to start just like we did in the Grayscale tutorial, and just like we do in all our Marines. And I'm actually going to get a brush that has a decent point on it. And we're going to start with the top of the front of the foot. Move my palette to where I can reach it. And you can see it's subtle, but we don't want it to be too crazy, because we don't want this to just make the entire model just pale, right? So we're going to get the front of the foot there. We're going to get the front of this knee guard here. And just a little bit on the inside plate there. You see it's subtle, but it is defining those shapes. A little bit there. Kind of the side of the belt buckle. And we're not getting way back up in there because there's no light getting back in there. So a little on the corner of that top plate and then down the front. And you can see we're going down about a third of the way on the brush. And we're using the side of the brush right on that corner to get a nice clean line on that edge highlight. We don't want to overdo it on the edge highlight, but we do want a nice crisp line there. Now we're going to get the top of this knee guard here. And then a little bit on this interior hip plate. And a little bit on the leg there to really get, and you can see that's a nice highlight. I like that. I'm happy with that. This is very much like a canary, like Tweety Bird yellow. It's not as strong. I don't know what happened to the color in that when it was in the palette there, but so a little bit on the top of the foot there. Then we'll come in here on the leg plate and get the top of this and go all the way down the side. Really get a nice break with side there. Get the top of this ankle guard here. And this, there isn't a sharp edge, so we just have to be very careful with the tip of the brush. But we're only highlighting the top of that. We're not getting super crazy with the going on every single edge on the model, heavy metal style. It's definitely a style. It looks good, obviously, but it's not. It's time consuming, and if it's not done really well, it can be distracting. So I just do what I call lead edge highlighting, where I get the edges that the light's actually going to interact with. Like if the light's coming in through here, it's going to hit all these edges, but it's not necessarily going to hit like the bottom of that edge there. So we're going to get the top, we're going to get the back of the leg here, back of the leg here, and a little bit on the heel. And that's a nicely highlighted leg. I'm happy with that. I can live with that. And it took, 2 minutes. So the idea is to define these shapes with the edge highlighting without just getting lost in it, and then you spend forever edge highlighting. Oh my gosh, too much on the side there. Again, get the brush wet, rub, and because we're working with thin paint, that'll come right off. And even though that has, see that left a little, I don't know if you can even see that in this light, left a little bit of a watermark there on the side of the foot, that's fine because we're going to come back and do some weathering. So when we do a little bit of chipping on the foot there, that's going to disappear. So we don't have to worry about that. And now little hip plate, this little thigh plate, again, just the part that the light is going to interact with, a little bit up there, a little bit here on the butt plate, but not much. I mean, we don't want to go crazy here with the edge highlights, but we do want to define these shapes. So a little bit on this edge here. There we go. That looks good. And we'll come up here to the backpack since we're back here and get the sides and just a little bit down in the corner. But we don't really want to go down further than that because we want that to stay in shadow, right? So we'll get that rivet, we'll get that rivet. Then this is a little tricky. Got a little dried paint on the end of my brush there. This is a little bit tricky, but we want to use the side of the brush and get the top of this little circle here. But we want to angle it so we're getting both pieces of that at the same time, the outer part and the inner part. I'm just holding this way too close. There we go. So you can see there we got a nice highlight on there. Really happy with that. Got the legs, got everything. So a little bit on the side of the outsides of the backpack here. And the exhaust vent there. Same on this side. But on the exhaust vent, flip it, get a little bit here. And we're actually going to carry that through to the front and get the front of these. And then same on the other side. Get the sides here. And then the front of the exhaust flap. Okay. Get these the front of these squares up here just to give a little bit of differentiation to those. I'm glad those highlights are showing up a little bit. They're prevalent on the model, but the way the lighting's working, they're a little hard to see, but they are subtle. They're not, we don't want like this huge jump. So then we're going to come in here, and this is just practice. This is just hard because there's no edge there to follow. But we want to get a nice definition of that knee. So we're going to come down the side there and get some definition. And then when we come back, when we do the oil wash, it'll fall right into that crease there at the bottom of the knee and really finish that off for us. So moving to the front upper portion of the model. So you'll notice I went all the way around the model on the bottom, and then I did the backpack. I actually forgot to do this side of the backpack. That's fine. I can just hit it real quick. There we go. And then I did the bottom all the way around, and now I'm going to move up to the top part of the model. And that's so I just don't miss anything. I'm highlighting similar shapes as I go. So knuckle, so those segments in the hand. And then for this, just the top here. And then quick edge highlight down the front. And then the back of those finger joints, just very lightly going down those. And then we're going to get top here, front of this kind of wrist area, front of that plate, top of that plate. And then just because of where it sits on the model, this is also kind of the top here. We're going to come down just a little bit just to define it from the elbow. So the front there, and then this elbow, this center line elbow highlight, very important. And then we're going to come do the elbow there. So you see that arm is much better defined than it was a minute ago, just by doing just a little lead. Like if you flip this model, you know, none of this is ever going to be highlighted in here, ever. But when you look at it, how you would look at it on the table, it looks good. And it's not highlighted in there, not because we're lazy. but it's not highlighted in there because it's in shadow. No light's not going to get down there and interact with those edges down there. At least that's what I tell myself, to not edge highlight down there. But it's just not, it just doesn't, you'd have to mix a different color, and like it just doesn't add, people don't turn my models upside down very often. So it just doesn't add as much to a model as the time that you would spend executing it. And so for me, it's not worth the time. It doesn't really add to the overall model. Really, you're the only person that's ever going to know that it's painted. So front of the gorget, so I just don't do it. Spend my time doing something else. So front of the gorget, I like that highlight. That highlight always kind of starts to really set things off on the model. So a little bit on the very front of the gorget on the inside, just to really get that definition humming. And then what I think is probably the most important highlight on a Space Marine is this head crest. Very, very important highlight to nail. And again, we're using the side of the brush yeah, looking good. Now we're going to get a little above the eye here, very faint, above the eye here, straight down the middle of the helmet, and then the ear covers and that little knob on the side there. Same on this side. Excuse me. And you can carry over a little bit onto the side, like especially here where the helmet's exposed. But you don't necessarily want to connect all those lines. You want to leave a little bit of a gap, so it's not just a solid highlight all the way around. So that looks pretty good. Pretty good. So we're just doing that last little double check here. Make sure we got everything that we wanted to get. Do a little, make sure we get these rivets here. Got the back there, that. Oh, we didn't get the right foot. See, this is why we do the last little inspection there. And I'll do that inspection and still miss stuff and have to go back sometimes. But it's always nice to figure it out when we have the paints out and when we have, they're on the palette and they're workable, rather than figuring it out after we do the oil wash and we're like, well, how do I go back and do that exactly? So and then a little bit on the front here, very thin. There we go. Looking pretty good. Happy with that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the transfers. And this is the same order of operations that I follow for all my transfer work. First things first, we're going to get our transfers out. And so we have the Imperial Fist transfer for his left shoulder, and then my logo transfer for his right shoulder, because I will be giving this model away. So we want to put it on a paper towel and then wet the paper towel, is what I just did there. The backing paper will soak up that water and release the transfer. And this is so we don't have to go fishing through a pool of water to try and find our transfers. So while those transfers are working their way off the paper, we're going to apply a coat of gloss varnish to the shoulder pads. And we do this because it gives the transfers a smooth surface to land on, basically. So just on the shoulder there. And, you want to make sure it's coated. But we don't have to go, we don't have to go crazy with it. And I use Liquitex gloss varnish. You can get it at most not even hobby stores, most like craft stores. But Liquitex gloss, it's just straight out of the bottle. It works really well. I get a really nice finish, so I really like it. And then we're gonna use. Whoops. Oh, that's where that was. I was wondering where that was. Micro Set and Micro Sole. These are the best to use for transfers unless something else has been released and I just don't know about it. But this is what I use, what I've been using for a long time. And then a kind of old brush, very large brush. This is, I think, a size 2. You want a big brush for this. You want a lot of surface area to work with. So we're going to check on our transfers. And we're going to see how they're doing. That one's off. And that one's off. I forgot to mention these logo transfers were made by Fallout Hobbies. If you need custom transfers, they are a very, very good source. To get those, they'll take any image and make a transfer out of it for you. I'm not paid by them or I don't get free stuff from them for repping their product. It's just a really good service. I've been using it for a long time. So first things first, we're going to take the Micro Set, the blue bottle, Micro Set. We're going to take that, we're going to get our brush, and we're going to put a good amount of that on the shoulder pad. And what the Micro Set is going to do is it's going to adhere the transfer to the area. So we're going to take our Imperial Fist chapter transfer. Oh my gosh, let go, please. Thank you. And we're going to get it on the edge of our brush like that. And we're going to put it as low on the shoulder pad as we can. And the reason that we do that is because the shoulder pad really starts to curve once we get up here. And we want to try and keep this as low as we possibly can to minimize how much of this has to go over that curve. And you can see it's not flat. It's not laying down. That's fine. We just want to get it adhered on there with that Micro Set, and then we will work out all those little bumps and everything when it comes time to do the Micro Sole. So circular transfers like this on a curved surface are very difficult. There's no two ways about it. It's just tough, but there are ways to work those, and we will show you how today. I will show you how. I don't know if it develops a split personality or something, but keep using we. And same thing with the logo transfer. This one is trimmed very, very close, and the ears kind of split off of it, so it actually lays down pretty nicely. And this is so when I give it away, people know, hey, that's not just a tactical, that's not just a, standard intercessor. That guy's got, that's a special, that's one of a kind. So we're going to let that evaporate. Just let it evaporate, does not take very long. Then we're going to go in with the Micro Sole. And we're going to give it a good thick coat of microsole. This is just liquid, so it's not really a coat. It's more like just like a pool of microsole. Same on the logo transfer. And what the microsole does is it kind of dissolves the paper in the transfer. It makes the transfer very, very soft. And what that allows us to do is get those wrinkles out in the next stage. So, and then after this is done, then we're going to do part 5, and part 5 is the really fun part. Part 5 is going to be doing some sponge chipping weathering and the oil wash, and that's just going to turn this guy up to 11 because Imperial Fists look amazing with sponge weathering. So if you saw on the, if you check on my Facebook page or Instagram, I did a one-on-one tutoring session today with a Patreon supporter, and we did an Imperial Fist Rhino where we did panel modulation and masking and chipping and it looks really, really cool. So the picture of the final product from that session is up on social media, and it just looks rad. So using those same techniques in this video that I'll be doing, with the exception of like masking off the stripe and stuff like that, but the sponge weathering and oil wash is the same in this video as it is, on that Imperial Fists Rhino. So these techniques scale up to, vehicle size. So we're going to go on this one first. It looks like the micro sole has evaporated. And what we're going to do, this is the damp towel from the transfer. You can use a different damp towel. We're going to press very, very lightly and just kind of roll just a little bit to get any kind of bubbles or anything out of there. It's going to be a little bit trickier on this one, but we just want to kind of push in the center and roll our way out and roll out and give it a little wiggle where you can see it's kind of popped up a little bit. You can give it a little wiggle, but we are not pressing that hard because we don't want to shift this and we don't want to tear it, but we do want to work out those bends. And now you can see that laid down really nicely. There's a little kind of bend right there on the bottom corner, but the rest of the transfer looks pretty good. But what we're going to do anyway is we're going to hit it with a little bit more microsole. And we can actually get that out of the corners there. And because we gloss varnished the whole shoulder pad, this microsole is just sitting right on top of that. It's not damaging the paint or anything. This is definitely the hardest part of doing Imperial Fists, I think, is the circular transfer. The yellow, no problem, but the circular transfer is a challenge. It's very much a challenge. But you do a few dozen of these and you practice at it. There we go. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Perfect. So it's not 100% perfect. Okay, there's still whoever gets this model, you're going to notice it maybe. There's still a little tiny crease like right there. I've pushed on it a few times. I've rolled it a few times. We've micro-soled it a couple times. I just don't think it's coming out. It's very, very, very subtle. But you can see the rest of that transfer. You can see around the edge of that transfer there. The rest of that transfer laid down well. I'm going to stop messing with it. That is good. I am happy with that. So we're going to leave that just as it is. And of course, the Legalized Mischief transfer looks great. But we're going to leave that just where it is. We have a nice iron. I've got iron hands on the brain, obviously. We've got a nice Imperial Fists intercessor. And really, if you left this here, that's pretty good. I'd be pretty happy with that. But we're going to take it a step further, and we're going to complete this with a little bit of subtle weathering and an oil wash to really define those shapes on the model. So really, really looking forward to that. It's one of my favorite parts. We finished painting the model. Now we're going to add a little weathering, do an oil wash, varnish, and pop him on the base, and he'll be good to go. So with the Imperial Fist, I think that yellow just lends itself to weathering so well. And a little sponge chipping goes a long way with these guys. We don't want to overdo it, but I think it's a great addition to the model. And I'm going to show you how to get a great result with sponge chipping with just a couple colors. We're going to use some pluck foam from any kind of miniature case or anything like that. You get this foam. It used to be blister packs. You get the foam. And then I use these little tweezers, these little angled tweezers to get in the hard to reach places, and then just a paper towel so we can kind of dab the paint off and make sure that we're not getting too much paint on our sponge before we start chipping. So I'm using Vallejo Game Color Tinny Tin and black because I want it to be a little bit metallic so it shows like a paint chip and exposes a little metal underneath. But I don't want to use just a straight metallic. So I'm using the black to take some of that metallic sheen out of it, and also to just darken it a lot. The Tinny Tin's too bright, so we don't want to use just straight Tinny Tin. We want to mix it a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm just tearing this foam. We're going to tear it into a very small piece and kind of get it a little rounded and irregular. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us an irregular pattern on the model, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our palette. We're going to get a little bit of that chipping mix, that Tinny Tin and black, and then we're going to get most of that off of the sponge to where it's just very, very light. I think I need to mix that just a little bit more, the black there. There we go. And to show you what color we're going for here, it is a very, very dark, it's almost black, but you can see it does have that metallic, does have a bit of a metallic sheen to it, and it's not a true black. True black would be way too dark. And it would look unnatural, but by mixing those two colors, we get a more natural look and a more interesting kind of color than if we were to just try to use just straight black. It just wouldn't look right. So we're going to get that little bit of foam in the tweezers. You get a little bit on there, kind of dab it off. And you can see it's very, very faint on the sponge. And that's what we want. We just want little tiny dots. We don't want to just mash this thing with this sponge. And we want to concentrate in areas where there would be more wear and tear. So the further from the center of the body that we get, there'd be more wear and tear. The arms, the legs, things like that. Definitely the feet. So just a little tap in the front of the leg there. And that's a little heavy on the inside of the leg, but that's okay. A couple spots like that won't hurt. If you see it going on heavy like that, just give it a couple dabs off to the side and get some of that paint off there. A little bit on the knee there. Again, we want this to be subtle. We don't want this to be kind of overbearing as far as taking over the paint scheme. I'm going to readjust this. It's getting a little too linear. There we go. So a little bit on the back of the foot, a little bit on the back of the leg there, the ankle, a little on the side of the leg. So you can see there, it's very subtle. It's not a ton of chipping. A little bit on the hip plate, a little bit on the hands, and now we're out of paint. So we're going to go back and we're going to dab that off and make sure that we're not getting too much paint. So a little bit on the elbow, a little bit on the forearm here. But again, we don't want this to take over. We don't want there to be just too much of this chipping, and we'll have an opportunity to tone it down with the next step of chip. We're going to do another chipping step after this one, where we're going to tone this down a little bit too. So like the top of the backpack and stuff, you know, how much impact is that really going to get during the course of, you know, his service? Like the top of the backpack is not going to be impacted that much. The front of his helmet, maybe a little bit on the gorget there, but like maybe a little bit on the edges of the backpack. But like the backpack by his, like behind his head, is very unlikely to get impacted in any way. We do want to hit the pauldrons just a little tiny bit. We do want to get a little bit onto the pauldrons. And we did the transfers first so that that chipping can kind of be extended into the transfer and integrate that into the color scheme as well. So just a little, and you can see there, just a little bit of chipping goes a long way. I'm still not in love with this area down here, so I'm going to hit it again and get a little bit more. And try and get a little bit on the inside of that back leg. That's a little better. But as you can see, a little goes a long way with this. You don't want to overdo it. And that's why we use so little paint when we're doing it, so that we can, because we can always go back and add more. But we can't really undo this chipping. This is not, there's no going back really and touching this up. So that looks pretty good. Maybe just a little on his helmet. And you see it's just a couple chips on the ear there and a little bit on the front of the faceplate. That's all we want there. Now what we're going to do, and this is what separates just kind of your, like we could leave it there. A lot of people do just leave it there with some chipping. But we're going to take it a step further. We're going to go back with that edge highlight color. So the gold yellow. And a little bit of that Dorn Edge technical. We're going to mix that up. And now this is going to simulate more of paint scratches rather than paint chips. And you'll see what I mean when we sponge this on. And so these are more superficial. And this helps give some variation as well to the overall chipping effect that we have on the model. This is a really nice touch. So we want to get a little bit on there. Same process that we did with the black. We're just going to get a little bit of that highlight color, and you can see, and we're going to go in the same areas, like you can see on the knee there. We're going to go in the same areas that we did the black chipping. And it just kind of adds a little bit of like a highlight to the chipping. But it also adds like some superficial, it's just where like you can imagine the paint's been hit and it's been scratched, but it hasn't actually chipped off to where it's exposing that dark color underneath. It's just been impacted a little bit. Come on. There we go. Maybe a little scratch in the, little bit on the backpack. So we can do like little scratches necessarily in places that may not actually get full on chipping, but just get kind of the average wear and tear of being in battle. A little bit on the gorget here. You can see, like, especially on that shoulder there, we're getting some nice chipping. And then on the legs. And chipping is a little hit or miss. I mean, chipping is definitely a risk. Chipping is definitely a little hit or miss, and it is a risk. I'm not in love with the chipping on the lower left leg there, but that's okay. You know, it's a learning experience. Each model is different, but it does add a lot of character to the model. And it just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of patience. You see there on the backpack, can you see that? We added just some superficial, like on the shoulders. I really like this effect, going in and sponging a little bit of a lighter color on top of the dark color. It just adds another layer of interest. It adds another layer of, I'm trying to look. So that looks pretty darn good. Happy with that. So now we're going to take our gloss varnish. I use Liquitex gloss varnish straight out of the bottle. Excuse me, I'll get this raised up a little bit. Liquitex gloss straight out of the bottle. And we're going to gloss varnish the whole model because we're going to pin wash with that oil wash. And then while this dries, we're going to make our oil wash. So we're going to gloss varnish this whole model. And give it a nice even coat of the gloss. Make sure we get the chest eagle. Make sure we get underneath here. And then we're going to come back and matte varnish after the oil wash. This also gives the transfers, it really integrates the transfers well. There we go. So we're going to set him off to the side. We're going to let him dry. And while he's drying, we're going to make our oil wash. And for this oil wash, in previous videos, I've done a little bit darker wash, but because of the coloring of the Imperial Fist, I thought it would be a little too dark. And so for this, we're going to use a little bit lighter color combination for the oil wash. And now, so we're going to use Artist White Spirit, and I'm going to use this little salsa container. But I have these Tamiya glass jars that I use to make oil washes and keep them just for when I need to use them, they're already made. I can just open them and it's ready to go because it has this seal. It keeps this from evaporating. So this is my typical oil wash mix, and you can see how dark it is. I just think it's too dark for Imperial Fists, for that yellow. So we're going to make a little bit different mix for Imperial Fists. If you're planning on doing this on an army level, I do recommend getting one of those Tamiya jars for like $2 and making this wash and just having it on hand. So the little bit of Artist White Spirit, I'm probably going to need a little bit more of that. And we're going to use raw umber and burnt sienna. That we want this to be more red brown than black brown. But the raw umber, as you'll see, is super dark. Like this is very much a very dark, almost black brown, and you can see how dark and black brown that color is. And that's perfect. We don't want to use pure black because pure black is just going to be too dark, I think. So we're going to mix in this raw umber, and that's too thin, but I think when we add this burnt sienna, it's going to really end up being just the consistency we need, just the color we need. And you'll see this burnt sienna is very, very red. And that's the combination that we want. So you can see how red that burnt sienna is. And we're using a synthetic brush, always a synthetic brush with the oils. Otherwise your brush will just get eaten alive by the oils and the white spirits. So make sure that's mixed really, really well. Perfect. Look at that. It's beautiful. That is beautiful color, beautiful consistency. And I'll rotate this so we can see. So you can see this is really the consistency you want. It's still a little translucent, but it has some teeth, right? And it's a little more red. It's a red brown, but it's dark. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So we're going to keep that. We're not going to mess with that anymore. Excuse me. And then this guy looks pretty dry. So we're going to take this oil wash, and we're going to do, we're actually going to take a little bit less. Oops. Oh my gosh. Ooh. Tutorial gets harder when you drop the model, but quick field repair and we'll be ready to go. I just need him to come off his base in like 10 minutes for the last part of this, for the basing part. And we'll just get him on there. Give him another 10 seconds to dry. And we're going to use a little bit less trashed synthetic brush. I mean, this thing's trashed. I use it for a million oil washes, but hopefully this guy, there we go. So we're going to start. This is just a little bit more targeted. So we'll start, and you can see that just wick into the recesses like that. Now, because we did the overall gloss varnish, we do not have to be too fine with this. And it's going to end up looking like more of an overall wash than just a pin wash. And that's fine, because it's going to wipe right off. So that's why we're using oils. That's why we're using gloss varnish. But you don't want to just necessarily go out and just coat the entire miniature. But you see how that looks good. See how well that defines all those shapes? I love this part. One of my favorite parts. So make sure we're getting, and I think this color is spot on. I think this is just what we needed. Make sure we're getting, the belt buckle. Make sure we're getting the arms here. The hand. Kind of this middle middle of the leg there, all these little kind of indents and divots that we don't have to shade and pick out while we're painting, because we're going to come back at the end and really just get it with the oil wash and, be good with it. So this technique, if you haven't used it, I highly recommend giving it a try, sticking with it if it doesn't work the first time, because there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve, figuring out the consistency and everything. Took me a while to figure out, but once you do, and then we want to get this pad so that we get that edge of the pad, kind of if there's any kind of bleed over from the black into the yellow pad, this is going to help kind of fudge that a little bit and give us a little leeway with that, where it's not as obvious and it's kind of covering that a little bit. We want to get in here on the aquila and the gorget area, and then under the head, we want to shade that. That was a little too bright. And make sure we get the helmet. Make sure we get the front of the helmet. Back of the backpack. Fingers there. And we could maybe even hit these sides again, really get a good, so we want a good definition. Most of this is going to get wiped off anyway, but we want to give it a chance to get some good definition around that helmet crest there. Let me take a little bit of that off. That was a little too much. So we don't want to leave this like pooling in places, but we don't need to be surgeons with it either, because we're just going to wipe it right off. This is going to come right off. So that looks good. Super happy with that. We're going to leave this off to the side just in case we end up picking up too much with our Q-tip in the wash stage. Then we still have that available to kind of do a little quick touch up if we need to. We're going to put some pure white spirit into a separate container, and it's almost dry. So we're going to break out our patented heat gun. I don't do this in just everyday practice, but for the sake of this tutorial, a hair dryer would work, probably better, more preferable than a heat gun, because the heat gun gets really, really hot, and we don't want to melt the model. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to use the heat gun. I usually do batch painting and stuff, and this stuff dries really quick. I mean, the white spirit will evaporate and leave the effect that we want in like 5 minutes. So rather than sit here and wait 5 minutes for everything to dry, speed it up a little with the heat gun. So this is a very technical tool called a Q-tip. And we're going to dip that into the white spirit, and we're going to just go very gently. We are not rubbing this off. We're just very gently, I mean, we are rubbing it off, but we're not like, we do not need to push very hard to remove the oil wash just from the surface. We don't want to get down into the creases and undo the entire reason that we did an oil wash, which is to get those creases. But if you rub too hard, you will take paint off down to the plastic if you're just getting in there and really, really getting after it. You will take too much of this off. But you can see how it's just leaving that in the recesses. And this is a good example of why we kept this off to the side. So we're going to get that brush back. If I can find it. It's got to be here, right? I just threw it in there. There it is. So you can see, like, on the underside of the shin here, there's no oil under there. And I want that to be shaded. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of that oil wash, and I'm just going to put that back like that. And then we took off a little too much over here in those 2 creases. So I'm just going to put that back. And I'm just going to make sure we have the underside of this one as well, because now I'm worried about that. But you see how much better that looks shaded like that? So it's worth going back and adding that. It just takes 2 seconds. We're going to continue on, and then we'll come back. We'll make sure to come back to that. So just, again, very gently kind of wiping. We're wiping. We're not rubbing. How about that? That sounds better. We're wiping. So very gently wiping off just the surface, and you want to go, so like this is a horizontal line here on the back of the leg. So we want to go north to south. We want to go vertical on a horizontal surface. So we're not just wiping the oil right out of the line there. So we'll get back there. We'll get this hip plate here, ankle, side of the leg, the foot. And we're taking a lot of this off. We don't want them to look, grungy and super dirty. We just want them to look weathered. And this is more of a pin wash. If we're doing Death Guard or something, we can, you could even, like if I was painting Death Guard, you could even not do the gloss varnish and just do the oil wash. A lot less of the oil wash will stain the armor. A lot less of the oil wash will come off when you go back with the white spirit. But that would look great for Death Guard. So you play around with it. It has a lot of uses depending on how you prep the surface, the colors that you use. It's an extremely versatile technique. So we'll get those shoulders cleaned up. Get the gorget cleaned up a little bit. Get that chest aquila a little bit. And then we do want to clean up the helmet. We do want the helmet to be pretty clean. We don't want all of that left behind. But it's nice that we got the vents, the eyes, that little vent in the top center of the head. But we don't want the helmet to really look unkempt, because they are, Imperial Fists. So this kind of reflects, so this kind of paint scheme with the battle damage and everything reflects their kind of battle line status. And, but they also, are very well supplied, very well taken care of chapter. So they're not going to let all their stuff just go to hell. It's not just going to be in disrepair. So we want to reflect that. So even though we're doing battle damage and stuff, it's minimal. We're doing the oil wash, but it's more of a pin wash. And there you have, look at that. That is awesome. That pin wash just turned this thing up to 11. God, that looks good. Look at that. Yeah. I mean, it completely changed the legs. It completely chilled out. The battle damage doesn't look as out of place as it did before. This is a really nice looking model. I'm super happy with this. Not enough to change to Imperial Fists, but for you Imperial Fist enthusiasts out there, this is pretty cool. I'm happy with this. I was confident in doing this tutorial, but you never really know. You hope you remember how to do it, or you hope it turns out all right. This one turned out all right. This looks really cool. I like this model. Look at that. That is a nice looking model right there. That is solid. So while that white spirit is kind of evaporating, we're just going to pop him off his base and get, so we're going to have to matte varnish the base at the same time, so we might as well just kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So we're going to drill a little bit into his heel. Get a little bit of wire. which I thought I had prepped, but apparently not. Pardon me. And I use beading wire from just a craft store. This just says 1 yard 9 meters. I don't know what gauge this is. I use 3/4 millimeter drill bits. You just have to. You can get pinning sets from like Army Painter and stuff like that. Those are good too. So first things first, we're gonna see where on the base we're gonna place him, and we want to make sure that the pin, especially like on a base like this, we want to make sure the pin is gonna hit somewhere where we can drill it. So it's gonna hit like right about there. So we're gonna drill a hole there. There we go. Then just a little bit of glue. Actually, there it is. So we're going to come in here and we're actually going to clean off the old glue from the bottom of this foot just to get a better attachment to the base. And this is something that I do for pretty much all models that I paint. I'll put them on a painting base and paint them separately, and then I'll paint the bases separately. And at the end, that way I'm not worried about painting the base. Like if I tried to paint this base around him once he was finished, and I would be risking my paint job, it gives me more flexibility with basing, and it does take a little bit longer to kind of figure out where on the base they go and stuff when they're done, but I think it's worth it. Then we'll just put them in there. Make sure that he's sticking to the base. Move our wire. Get all this stuff out of the way. The glue. And we'll pick up our final paint for this model. And my favorite part, one of my favorite parts of miniature painting, period, is painting that black rim on the base and calling it done. But before we get to do that, we gotta varnish this puppy. So the white spirit's gonna have evaporated by now, and we're gonna use Vallejo acrylic matte varnish. I love this stuff. I ordered a gigantic bottle of it because they don't carry it locally. So when I was ordering it, I was like, yeah, I might as well get a big bottle. And this stuff is it's like a 20-ounce bottle of matte varnish. I think I'm good for a minute. So always test it to make sure. So like I'm going to test it on part of this base. So like if this base gets ruined, I'm not really that fussed about it. But that looks good. So now we're going to go and we're just going to give it a thin coat of that matte varnish. Make sure we get the base too. Back there, back top there. And now I'm just blowing a little air on it to kind of dry it out. This stuff dries really, really fast. One at the end, it dries really matte, really fast. So we'll hit the bolter again because it didn't look like it really got. And we can just make sure that we don't have any shiny spots left. So I forgot to get. So you can see like on the inside of his leg, like back there behind that line on the front of his leg, I forgot to wipe that off. Too late now. So once you varnish, there's no going back to like wipe off some of the oil. It's done. It's all done. So that looks pretty good. Oh, I love it when a plan comes together. Awesome. I love this hobby. That's so cool. Not enough to do an army, but it's cool. So now we're going to take, I use P3 Thamar Black for my base rims always, because it's a very, very soft black. It's not like a pitch black. It's a very soft black. And I just really like how it looks. This base is a little tricky because it is like multi-tiered, but I just use the side of the brush. Oops. There we go. And these bases, these Sector Imperialis bases, they're, how to paint these is up on the Patreon as well. This rusty textured steel basing. There's a tutorial using actually exactly this base up on the Patreon. So you could actually follow tutorials and get this exact model. Look at that. Yeah. God, that's cool. Oops. As I drop it. That is really, really cool. So after I finish posting this tutorial, I'm going to give this guy away to one Patreon supporter. And, you know, starting on the next project. So thank you all for following along. I hope you liked this Imperial Fist tutorial. Covered some really cool techniques. And we got a pretty badass looking Son of Dorn going on here. That is a nice looking model. So once again, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thanks for following along. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. And look forward to the next project. And we'll see you soon. Thanks.